Okay, your prayers have been answered. You're gonna learn about value today. You're gonna literally know everything there is to know about value, and you're gonna be so tired of learning. Your brain is gonna be literally twice the size, and I'm not. Now, there is this thing called light that basically allows us to see. And when we're talking about value, we're just really talking about the intensity of light on a certain object. That's really it. Without light, all value would be black. If there is an extreme presence of light, everything will be kind of white. Okay, so some of you guys might have heard about a term called HSV. So hue, saturation, and value. Okay? So hue, this is a lot to do with like how colors are absorbed and how objects absorb light and how they reflect light. It basically is the reflected value of an object. So what color does an object emit? That's what hue is. Saturation is the intensity of that color. So the more intense it is, the more true to its, the more pure its hue will be, right? And the less it will be grayer and get more desaturated. And then you have value, which again, how light or dark something is. Not to be confused with saturation, which is how saturated the color is. We'll talk about more of this when we get to color. But what I want you to understand is that value here is foundational. And I'll explain this like this. Take an object, any object of any color into a dark room and ask yourself, what is the value of that object? Because it has a value, and the value is, well, essentially some kind of, something like this, like a black, right? Or maybe like kind of darker gray, maybe like this color value, right? But it does have a value. Now, an object in a dark room has no hue. It doesn't have a saturation. Why? Because there is no light to reflect off of it to give it a hue, to give it a saturation. So value is foundational. This is when people say that black and white are not colors, they're just presence and absence of light. Because in absence of light, black is the only thing that you see, right? Now, all that being said, black and white in painting should be treated as colors because they are, basically. Because you can buy them in a tube, you can select them on a color wheel. They are basically essentially colors for our purposes. But it's important to understand what they represent. That being said, so here comes our first term that we're going to have to learn. Okay, it's the first term we're going to have to learn right now. And it's called base value / color. Okay, now I say / color. They don't mean the same thing, but effectively they do. Because as I said, we're going to treat value like colors. Because, well, when we're painting, again, we're using colors. We can't really paint with light and paint with dark. We can't really do that. So essentially these two terms become interchangeable. But they do mean different things. So but for this case, we're just going to keep it simple. Base value or color is just what is the base color of an object in a diffusely lit room. That's it. Now you're going to notice this, something kind of special, that different colored objects, and hence different materialed objects, have different values. Look at this, right? Look at how dark blue is different than green. Look at how they have different values. Look at how red is different from yellow, right? So colors in and of themselves have value, right? This is what I said, that value is foundational. You can't even take value out of color. You just can't. Now, why is red brighter than yellow? Why is yellow brighter than blue or green? This has to do with light absorption and how objects reflect light and so on and so forth. I'm just gonna say it. It's too complicated to explain right now, and I don't really care to do it. And honestly, you don't really need to know it. You just have to understand it that yes, colors have a specific. Now, as I said, I'm not gonna focus on color during this video, and we're only going to talk about base value from this point on. And we're going to talk about how the base value of an object interacts with the light and the world around it and how it changes. This is a gray ball in a gray atmosphere. This is the kind of ideal environment to determine the base value of an object. Now, why is this? Well, if we just change the value of the atmosphere, you will notice something. And that is that the color of the ball has changed, right? It's not that gray anymore. Now, if we go look at the color of the ball, this is the color of the ball, this right here, you can see that it's almost like white. But you don't see that here, right? Although this is the value of the ball, is this kind of white, in the picture, it's basically black, right? So what's going on here? The whole point that I'm trying to make here is that the environment ultimately is one of the things that influences our perception of the object the most. And base value is just like, it's basically the starting off point of our object. Now, we can change the value of this object. If we make it dark, suddenly you will see that, like, even in these kind of bright environments, it's going to stand out a lot. But again, as we kind of decrease the value, it's going to basically get dissolved into the atmosphere. If we increase the value at some point, you know, this black is now suddenly a lot more grayish than it used to be. Again, this is because the environment has a lot of influence on how we perceive the value of a certain object. This is kind of the rule of thumb when it comes to value in objects. That is, the lighter the value, the more easily it's influenced by its environment. So for example, think of this white ball. Let's change the value of the environment. It basically matches it 1-to-1, almost. Now if we make the ball a bit darker, suddenly this changes. So when we're talking about the base value, we're talking about, like, in this kind of perfect world, what would be the color of this object if the perfect amount of light was to hit it? So the only thing I want you to take from this is that there is such a thing called base value, and that it's affected by the environment that it's in, the kind of ambient light of the world, or the lack thereof. That's the only thing I want you to now understand.